Hi everyone, I am MATTEO Cristofaro, postdoc research fellow at the University of Rome Tor Vergata, and I'm going to present a paper co-authored with Federico Giannetti, PhD student in the same institution, that is entitled Heuristics in Entrepreneurial Decisions, a review, an ecological rationality model, and a research agenda. The research question that we are going to address for this paper is the following one. How can heuristics positively or negatively affect entrepreneurial decisions? The paper's type is systematically review, and the structure of the presentation is the following one. First, I will introduce the theoretical framework, then a methodology, findings, the ecological rationality model at the center of this work, and finally, conclusions. First, entrepreneurial decisions have been always clustered into decisions regarding opportunity recognition, opportunity assessment, and opportunity exploitation. In performing entrepreneurial decisions, entrepreneurs systematically deviate from the rational behavior of classical economic models due to their innate boundary rationality. These deviations are driven by biases. The term biases has been used by one stream of management entrepreneurial research and within this work to substantiate both cognitive traps and heuristics. Heuristics, for the sake of this work, are cognitive shortcuts that can alter impious or immediate management decisions. The study of heuristics has pervaded the entrepreneurial literature over the last 30 years, arriving at the following almost definitive conclusions. Entrepreneurs heavily rely on heuristics in their decision-making more than managers of established firms and non-entrepreneurs. Heuristics are likely to be the product of cognitive emotional intertwinement within and between decision-makers. And third, the reliance on heuristics mainly depends on personal experience, entrepreneurs' social network, and personal capital. This is the ecological rational model in general terms that will be applied in this paper as to read in a new way the role of heuristics in entrepreneurial decisions. In particular, the ecological rationality model assumes that individuals use a heuristic to make judgments about a so-called criterion, the object to be assessed. The heuristic that drives the judgment can be, for example, entering countries in firms internationalization only when there is the possibility to have shops run by local people, while the criterion is how to enter a country for firms internationalization. In so doing, classical and systematic decision-making analyses are substituted by heuristics, the vicarious functioning. This can be the case of the capability heuristic. How to enter the new country depends on the capabilities that the firm can utilize in their internationalization. Heuristics work on cues such as the amount of business connections with the local context and the reliability of local people to make inferences. However, it is worth noticing that cues have, among themselves, reciprocal connections. This is the so-called redundancy feature, and this influences the vicarious functioning. The ability of cues in general to help heuristic inference defines the cue-criteria relationships. This is the ecological validity. This emerges by answering the question: how much is the amount of business connections with the local context able to determine how to enter a country for firms internationalization? Meanwhile, the ability of the heuristic to infer the criterion takes the name of functional validity. The functional validity, however, may depend also on the spatio-temporal criteria in the provision of cues, the social and environmental features, cognitive capabilities, and other individual features of the decision maker. This is the research protocol we have implemented for our paper. First, we have collected a series of papers on a database such as Scopus, EBSCO, and the Web of Science, and these papers were only peer-reviewed journal articles published in English. And in order to filter them, we have inserted two strings, one related with the heuristic term and its synonymous, and another one with entrepreneurship and its synonymous. Resulting articles were then scanned by looking at abstract in the first place and then the full paper. Lastly, thanks to the snowballing technique, we had the 5 contributions and the final sample of 63 papers emerged. Then we thematically analyzed these 63 papers. In particular, we followed the 6 steps of Brown and Clark. First, familiarization with data. Second, generating initial codes. Papers have been coded according to a mixed approach based on both deductive analysis and inductive analysis. The initial codebook was composed by the type of heuristics and features of the decision context, such as the number of issue-related cues. Third, we searched for themes, so codes were analyzed and combined to form overarching themes that, in this case, have been found as the outcome of the implementation of heuristics. Positive, negative, or mixed outcomes. Fourth and fifth, we reviewed and defined themes. Sixth, we produced the report, elaborated according to the type of entrepreneurial decisions and looking at the ecological rationality of heuristics. Articles concerned with the effect of heuristics in entrepreneurship started appearing in 1992 with the work by Manimala, but about half of them, 29, have been published since 2014. This highlights that this topic has gained importance only in recent times, and because of that there is a need to extend the works of Cosset 2015 and Zhang and Cueto 2017. The other two reviews on heuristics in entrepreneurial decisions that stopped their analysis in 2014 and 2015. This is the modal descent of our contribution, and that reads in a new way the role of heuristics in entrepreneurial decisions taking into account the ecological rationality model. Reading the model depicted in figure from left to right, the affective states which substantiate the intervention of the affect heuristics are the main driver of entrepreneurial decisions. Indeed, depending on the affective disposition that pervades the decision maker, the choice environment is differently framed, that is, the framing heuristic, such that positive affective states lead to the positive framing of the initial decision context, while negative affective states lead to the negative framing of the context, that is substantiated by the letter A. However, the affective disposition of the entrepreneur may directly influence the outcome of entrepreneurial decisions, such that positive affective states lead to high performance entrepreneurial decisions, while negative affective states lead to low performance entrepreneurial decisions, and this is letter A1. In the first case, the direct influence on entrepreneurial decisions, the entrepreneur that positively or negatively frames the starting situation feels more or less confident about the environment. Consequently, the entrepreneur is less or more oriented towards labeling cues according to new cognitive categories, less or more prone to collect new cues, and less or more alerted to investigate the context. That is letter B. As a result, the number of both the issue-related and not issue-related cues decreases or increases. The number of cues, however, varies according also to the exposure of the entrepreneur to the social environment in which he is embedded, as well as to the type of entrepreneurial decision to be made. Indeed, in entrepreneurial decisions regarding opportunity recognition and assessment, if the entrepreneur is in contact with the social environment when collecting cues, the number of considered cues increases, but the time spent in collecting them compensates the time saved through the use of heuristics, as well as the risk perception of the entrepreneur being raised to the collection of confirming and non-confirming cues. That is letter D. In entrepreneurial decisions regarding opportunity exploitation, instead, if the entrepreneur is in contact with the social environment when collecting cues, prior assumptions on cues are likely to be reinforced with the consequence of restricting the information base for the entrepreneurial decision, D1. Without any regard whether cues are issue-related or not, the not numerous amount of cues leads to a sense of certainty, which leads to forecast a low risk of failure for a venture. On the contrary, a numerous amount of cues leads to uncertainty and as a consequence forecasts a high risk of failure, letter E. The low perception of risk has the effect of increasing expectancy in the outcome of the entrepreneurial decision, while the high perception has the counter effect of decreasing expectancy. According to a practical reading of the insights of these contributions, entrepreneurs are more aware of the chain of heuristic reasoning that is activated by their positive or negative affective disposition when facing the decisional situation. Positive affective states seem to foster better entrepreneurial decisions outcomes rather than negative affective states. This indeed would help the entrepreneur in analyzing only some relevant cues and take the plunge according to them, with the consequence of saving time and being the first mover when exploiting an entrepreneurial opportunity. In practice, the faster, the better. However, in contrast with Peters et al., this work underlies how affective states are not always a facilitator of the decision-making process. Indeed, when the affective risk is pervaded by a negative valence, the complexity of reasoning is increased by the collection of more and more cues. The main value added of the proposed systematic literature review on heuristics entrepreneurship studies is, in the first instance, an interpretative framework to understand how they produce positive or negative outcomes in the decisions. And in particular, it proposed that the affect heuristic has a primary role in a directly or indirectly influence the entrepreneurial decision. The affective states of the entrepreneur can either activate a series of heuristics that shapes the number of cues to be evaluated, or they directly influence the entrepreneurial decision. It can be proposed that affective states have a beneficial or not beneficial influence on entrepreneurial decisions, depending on their valence. Entrepreneurial decisions are conceived initially as an emotional-driven dialective of affect and cognition, reinforcing a recent, third emerging way, apart from the faulty interventionists and parallel competitive ones, of seeing as strongly intertwined the relationship between System 1 and System 2 of the human being, hereby called the affective cognitive cooperative approach. In fact, in line with the affect cognitive theory of managing decision, the affect heuristic has a prevalence in directing managing decisions through a direct influence on the content and depth of thought of the decision maker, despite not taking information features into account. Moreover, the interpretation for this work appears in line with the affect as information model and appraisal emotion theory. They both advance the driving function of feelings interpreting information and underline the intrinsic attachment of affective states to the lived experience, as also postulated by sense-making studies. In other words, this interpretation reinforces the stream of research dialogue about the so-called affective rationality or intuitive affect.